On Thanksgiving dinner, my husband Sylvester stood up with a glass of wine and said, "To Honoria, who has contributed absolutely nothing to this family for 40 years. I'm Honoria Northbridge. I'm 62 years old." I set down my fork. I looked at the 17 family members staring at me around our mahogany dining table. Then I smiled and said, "Thank you for dinner. I think I'll retire early." And I walked upstairs to pack my bags. But before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you how 40 years of marriage can end in a single sentence. The smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing filled our home at 847 Laurel Heights Drive. It was November 24th, 2024, Thanksgiving, and I had spent 3 days preparing this meal. The china was Wedgwood, inherited from Sylvester's mother. The silver was polished until it gleamed. The centerpiece was fresh chrysanthemums in burgundy and gold, arranged exactly as my husband preferred. 17 people sat around our extended dining table. Our daughter, Eleanor Northbridge Hayes, age 34, sat with her 12-year-old daughter, Sophie. My sister, Beatrice Sullivan, had driven 2 hours from Portland. There were Sylvester's colleagues from his days as CFO of Northbridge Manufacturing, Thomas and Patricia Whitmore, the Hendersons, the Clarks, his golfing partners, his bridge club friends. I had cooked for 3 days, brined the 22-pound turkey, made the cornbread dressing from scratch, prepared sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping Sylvester insisted upon, baked 3 pies, pumpkin, apple, and pecan, set the table at 6 that morning. At 62 years old, I could do this with my eyes closed. I had done this with my eyes closed for 40 years. "This turkey is magnificent, Honoria," Patricia Whitmore said, and I smiled. "Thank you, Patricia." "You've outdone yourself," Thomas added. Sylvester said nothing. He was 65, silver-haired, still handsome in that distinguished executive way. He'd retired 2 years ago, in 2022, after 38 years with the company. Since then, he'd been home every day, watching, commenting, controlling. I had been a pediatric nurse when we married in 1984. I was 22. Sylvester was 25 and ambitious. "My career has more potential," he'd said 6 months into our marriage. "It makes sense for you to stay home. We'll start a family soon." We had Eleanor in 1990. I never went back to nursing. 40 years of making breakfast. 40 years of cleaning our 4,000-square-foot home. 40 years of organizing his social calendar, hosting his business dinners, managing his household while he built his career. Everything was in his name. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. The investment portfolio worth, though I wasn't supposed to know, approximately $12 million. "I handle the finances," he'd always said. "It's easier this way, for taxes." I had believed him, or maybe I had been too tired to fight. The conversation around the table was pleasant. Sophie talked about her school play. Beatrice asked about Eleanor's work as a graphic designer. The Whitmores discussed their upcoming cruise. Then Sylvester stood. He was holding his wine glass, a 2019 Bordeaux that cost $347 per bottle. I knew because I'd seen the receipt in his study. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced. The table fell silent. Sylvester commanded attention. He always had. It was one of the things I'd found attractive 40 years ago. That confidence, that presence. "To another successful year for the Northbridge family," he began. "To health, prosperity, and tradition." People raised their glasses. I raised mine. "And to my wife, Honoria." He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Who has contributed absolutely nothing to this family for 40 years. The silence was immediate and crushing. "Dad," Eleanor started. "I'm joking, of course," Sylvester said smoothly, but his eyes held mine. "A toast to the woman who has kept our home running while I built our fortune. To Honoria, who has never worked a day in her life, but has certainly enjoyed the fruits of my labor." The laughter that followed was uncomfortable, forced. Patricia Whitmore wouldn't meet my eyes. I set down my fork carefully, precisely. I folded my napkin, linen, monogrammed, washed and pressed yesterday, and placed it beside my plate. "Thank you for dinner," I said clearly. My voice didn't shake. It should have. Inside, I was breaking into pieces I didn't know how to reassemble. I think I'll retire early. Please, everyone enjoy the pies. They're in the kitchen. I stood. Eleanor stood too. Mom, it's fine, sweetheart. I touched her shoulder. I'm just tired. I walked through our home, past the living room with its cream-colored carpets I'd had cleaned last Tuesday, past the gallery wall of family photos I'd arranged and updated for 20 years, past the antique credenza I'd spent 6 hours polishing last week, and climbed the stairs to our master bedroom. Only when the door was closed did I let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. I sat on the edge of our king-sized bed, California King, $4,000 mattress, sheets I'd ordered from that boutique shop Sylvester preferred, and stared at the wall. Never worked a day in her life. I had been a nurse. I had helped save children's lives. I had held crying parents and explained diagnoses and monitored vitals and learned medications and worked 12-hour shifts and come home exhausted and fulfilled. And I had given it up because Sylvester said his career mattered more. Contributed absolutely nothing. I had raised our daughter. I had managed every aspect of our home. I had organized every dinner party that helped him network, every golf outing that secured his deals, every charity event that polished his image. I had been the perfect corporate wife, invisible but essential, uncompensated but indispensable, enjoyed the fruits of my labor, his fortune, his success, as if I had been a parasite for 40 years. There was a soft knock on the door. Grandma? Sophie's voice, tentative. I straightened, wiped my eyes, though I hadn't realized I was crying. Come in, sweetheart. She slipped through the door, 12 years old, dark hair like her mother, but with my blue eyes. She was holding something. Her tablet, an older model I'd given her 2 years ago when I'd upgraded mine. Are you okay? She asked. I'm fine. She sat beside me on the bed. For a long moment, we didn't speak. What Grandpa said wasn't nice, Sophie finally said. No, I agreed. It wasn't. Mom says she's going to talk to him. I almost smiled. Eleanor had been trying to talk to her father about his treatment of me for years. It never changed anything. Your grandfather is... I paused, searching for words. Sometimes people don't realize how their words affect others. He realizes, Sophie said quietly. I think he meant to hurt you. Out of the mouths of babes. Why? I asked, though I wasn't sure I was asking her or myself. Sophie shrugged. Maybe because he can, maybe because you let him. I looked at her, this wise, observant child, and something shifted inside me. You let him. For 40 years I had let him. I had accepted his diminishment, his control, his casual cruelty. I had told myself it was normal, that all marriages had their difficulties, that I was lucky to have financial security even if I had no financial access. You're right, I said. Sophie looked surprised. I am? Yes. I stood, opened my closet, pulled out the suitcase, a Toomey carry-on, birthday gift from last year, never used. Will you help me pack? Her eyes widened. Are you leaving? I'm going to stay with your mother for a while, if that's all right with her. She's wanted you to leave him forever, Sophie said immediately. Then, more carefully, is it really okay? Are you safe? Safe? What a question. I had been physically safe for 40 years. Emotionally safe? That was a different story. I think so, I said. But Sophie, can I ask you to do something for me? Anything. If your grandfather comes to your house to talk to your mother about this, if he comes while I'm staying there, I need you to be careful. He's going to be angry. He might say things, do things. I didn't know why I was saying this. Some instinct, some understanding that the Sylvester who could humiliate me in front of 17 people was capable of more than I'd previously acknowledged. I'll be careful, Sophie promised. Grandma, can I tell you something? Of course. I'm glad you're leaving. I've been worried about you for a long time. The tears came then, finally. I pulled her into a hug. 20 minutes later, I came back downstairs. The guests were gone. Sylvester was in his study, door closed. Eleanor was in the kitchen with Beatrice, doing dishes. "Mom," Eleanor said when she saw me in my suitcase, her face flooded with relief. "Thank God. Can I stay with you for a while?" "For as long as you need." She hugged me fiercely. "I have the guest room ready. I've had it ready for 5 years. Beatrice took my other hand. "It's about time, Nora." Only Beatrice called me Nora. It was my name before I became Mrs. Sylvester Northbridge, before I became Honoria, the wife, the hostess, the invisible woman who never worked. "I need to tell him," I said. "Do you want us there?" Eleanor asked. "No, I need to do this alone." I walked to Sylvester's study, knocked once, entered without waiting for permission. The first time I'd done that in 40 years. He looked up from his laptop. "What?" "I'm leaving." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "You're leaving me? Where exactly do you think you're going, Honoria?" "Eleanor's." "For how long?" "I don't know. Maybe forever. I'm going to file for divorce." The laughter died. His face went cold, colder than I'd ever seen it. "You file for divorce and I will make sure you get nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing. This house is mine. The accounts are mine. You have no money, no career, no skills. You're 62 years old. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I know I can't stay here." "This is ridiculous. You're being emotional, overreacting to a joke." "It wasn't a joke, Sylvester." "Fine." He stood, walked around his desk. "If you want to throw a tantrum, go ahead. Spend a few days with Eleanor. But when you come crawling back, and you will come crawling back, don't expect me to forget this embarrassment." I left without responding. In the car driving to Eleanor's townhouse in the city, Beatrice in the passenger seat, Eleanor following in her own car with Sophie, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, absolutely. But also hope. I didn't know it then, but in her pocket, Sophie had her tablet, and she had made a decision of her own. She was going to protect her grandmother, whatever it took. Sophie Hayes had always been an observant child. At 12 years old, she noticed things adults missed. The way her grandfather's voice changed when he talked to Grandma Honoria, the way her grandmother flinched at certain words, the careful way Honoria moved through the house as if trying not to disturb the air itself. The night of Thanksgiving, November 24th, 2024, Sophie made a decision. She was going to protect her grandmother. She just didn't know how yet. The answer came 3 days later, on November 27th, when Sylvester Northbridge appeared at their townhouse on 342 Elmwood Terrace. Sophie's mother Eleanor had just left for a client meeting. "I'll be back in 2 hours," she'd said. "Keep the door locked. Don't answer for anyone." Sophie had nodded. Grandma Honoria was in the guest room, painting. She'd set up a small easel by the window and had been working on watercolors for hours. It was the happiest Sophie had seen her in years. Then the doorbell rang. Insistent, angry. Sophie looked through the peephole. Her grandfather stood there, face red, fist raised to knock again. She didn't open the door. "Eleanor, open this door!" His voice was muffled but furious. "I know you're in there. We need to talk about your mother." Sophie stood frozen, heart pounding. "Eleanor!" Louder now. "This is ridiculous. Honoria needs to come home. She's making herself look senile. Unstable. What do you think people are going to say?" The lock on their door was old, a simple deadbolt, but there was a window next to it, partially open for air. Every word came through clearly. Sophie's eyes fell on her tablet, sitting on the entry table. The tablet Grandma had given her 2 Christmases ago. She'd downloaded games on it, some school apps, and, because she'd been researching a school project about journalism, a voice recording app. She grabbed the tablet, opened the app, hit record, set it on the table near the window. "I'm giving you until Friday," Sylvester said, and his voice had gone cold. Calculating. Sophie had never heard him sound like this. "Friday, November 30th. If Honoria isn't home by then, I'm filing papers. I'm going to prove she's mentally incompetent. Dr. Patterson will testify. He owes me from that hospital board vote in 2019. He'll say whatever I need him to say. Sophie's breath caught. And when I get conservatorship, because I will get conservatorship, she'll be right back where she belongs. Only this time she'll have no control over anything. I'll manage her care, her money, every decision. She wants to humiliate me? Fine. She'll see what happens when you cross Sylvester Northbridge. There was silence. Then footsteps. He was leaving. Sophie waited until she heard his car start. A black Mercedes S-Class, license plate SNB 2019, before she picked up the tablet with shaking hands. The recording was 17 minutes and 43 seconds long. She played it back, volume low. Her grandfather's voice, crystal clear. I'm going to prove she's mentally incompetent. Dr. Patterson will testify. He'll say whatever I need him to say. She'll have no control over anything. Sophie saved the file, titled it, Recording 1, Nov 27, Front Door. Then she sat down and thought very carefully about what to do next. She couldn't tell her mother. Mom would confront Grandpa immediately, and he'd deny everything. Adults always believed other adults over children. She couldn't tell Grandma. It would scare her. Maybe make her go back. She needed more evidence. That's what they always said in the detective shows. You needed overwhelming evidence before you could prove something. Sophie opened YouTube on her tablet and searched. How to record conversations legally. The laws were complicated. But one thing was clear. In their state, you could record conversations if you were part of them, or if the conversation happened in your own home where someone didn't have reasonable expectation of privacy. Their front porch, where someone was shouting through a window, definitely didn't count as private. Over the next 3 weeks, Sophie became a careful observer. She noticed when her grandfather would visit. She learned his patterns. He came to the townhouse every Tuesday and Thursday evening, always when Eleanor was home, always to discuss this situation rationally. Eleanor would step outside to talk to him. Sophie couldn't hear those conversations. But sometimes Sylvester would raise his voice. Sometimes Sophie could position her tablet near an open window. She kept it charged. She kept the recording app open. She got better at it. December 3rd, 2024. Recording 2. Sylvester had arrived at 7:47 p.m. Eleanor stepped onto the porch with him, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. But the living room window was open 6 inches. Sophie had made sure of it. Dad, you need to accept that Mom is serious about this. Serious? Eleanor, your mother is 62 years old. She has no income, no assets in her name, no career to fall back on. This is a midlife crisis, or early-stage dementia. I've been researching the symptoms. She's not sick. Memory issues, irrational decisions, sudden personality changes. These are textbook signs, or textbook signs of a woman finally standing up for herself. A pause. When Sylvester spoke again, his voice was different, sharper. Don't take that tone with me. I'm still your father. And she's still my mother, who has clearly poisoned you against me. You know what? Fine. You want to side with her? Then you'll face the consequences too. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. When I prove Honoria is incompetent, and I will prove it, I'll get conservatorship. That includes financial control. And when I control the finances, the first thing I'm doing is ensuring that not a single dollar goes to you. You've been receiving monthly support since your divorce in 2020. Tumati. 4 years of $1,500 per month. That's $72,000 of my money. That's Mom's money, too. Nothing is your mother's. Everything is mine. The house is mine. The accounts are mine. The investments I built over 40 years are mine. She contributed nothing, and she'll get nothing. A judge won't see it that way. Sylvester laughed. A judge will see a 62-year-old woman with no work history, no financial knowledge, sudden claims of abuse with no evidence, and my expert medical testimony about her declining mental state, they'll see exactly what I want them to see. Inside, sitting perfectly still by the window, Sophie saved the file. Recording 2, Deck 3, Porch Conversation, duration 23 minutes, 18 seconds. December 10th, 2024. Recording 3, this one was the worst. Sylvester had come during the day, unexpected. Eleanor was at work. Sophie was home on a snow day from school. Grandma Honoria was there. Sophie had been upstairs doing homework when she heard the key in the lock. Wait, key? She crept to the stairs. Her grandfather had let himself in, but Mom had never given him a key. Honoria, his voice echoed up from the entryway. Sophie grabbed her tablet and started recording immediately, then positioned herself where she could hear but not be seen. Sylvester, Grandma's voice was shaking. You can't just... You need to leave. This is my daughter's house. I have every right to be here. Eleanor didn't give you permission. Eleanor is my daughter. Everything she has came from me. This townhouse? I gave her the down payment. $85,000 in 2019. She wouldn't have this place without me. That doesn't mean you can just walk in. Where do you think you're going to go, Honoria? Let's be realistic. You have no money, no career, no prospects. You're 62 years old. Who's going to hire you? Who's going to rent to you? You have nothing. I have Eleanor and Sophie. For how long? Eleanor has her own life, her own career. She doesn't want to support her mother forever. And Sophie? Sophie is 12. She should be focusing on school, not dealing with her grandmother's mental breakdown. I'm not having a mental breakdown. That's exactly what someone having a mental breakdown would say. His voice dropped lower. Sophie had to strain to hear. Listen to me carefully. You have 1 week. Come home by December 17th, or I start the legal proceedings. Dr. Patterson is ready. I have 3 neighbors willing to testify about your forgetfulness. I have documentation of your erratic behavior. What documentation? I haven't been erratic. That's what the documentation will say. And a judge will believe medical professionals and concerned neighbors over a confused elderly woman who abandoned her husband after 40 years. I'm not confused. I'm not elderly. I'm 62. You're old, Honoria. Face it. You're an old woman with no prospects who's throwing away the only security she has. You think you're brave? You're just scared. Scared you'll end up alone in some state facility with no one visiting because you alienated everyone who cared about you. Get out. Grandma's voice was barely a whisper. 1 week. December 17th. Or you'll wish you'd never been born. The door slammed. Sophie heard Grandma Honoria sink onto the stairs. Heard her crying. Soft, broken sounds that made Sophie's chest hurt. She waited 5 minutes. Then she came down the stairs, making noise so Grandma would know she was there. Grandma? She kept her voice innocent. I thought I heard someone. Are you okay? Honoria wiped her eyes quickly. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just, your grandfather stopped by. Oh. Sophie sat beside her on the stairs. Was he mean again? Grandma looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're angry. But sometimes they mean exactly what they say, Sophie replied quietly. Honoria pulled her into a hug. They sat there for a long time. Upstairs, later, Sophie labeled the file. Recording 3, Dector 10, Break-in and Threats. Duration, 31 minutes, 7 seconds. She had 3 recordings now. 3 pieces of evidence of her grandfather's cruelty, his threats, his schemes. But she needed more. She needed the big one, the one that would prove everything. While Sophie was collecting evidence, Honoria Northbridge was conducting her own investigation. It started on December 5th, 2024, when she received a letter from Sylvester's attorney, Theodore Blackwood of Blackwood & Associates, located at 1840 Commerce Street, Suite 900. The letter was formal, cold. It outlined Sylvester's position. Honoria had abandoned the marital home without cause. She was entitled to nothing beyond what Sylvester deemed appropriate. Any attempt to claim marital assets would be contested vigorously. Eleanor had read it and immediately said, "You need a lawyer, Mom. A good one. That's how Honoria found herself in the office of Catherine Reynolds, attorney at law, on December 8th. Catherine Reynolds was 43 years old, with short auburn hair and sharp gray eyes. Her office was on the 14th floor of the Stanton Building, with views of the city skyline. "Mrs. Northbridge," Catherine said after reading through the letter Sylvester's attorney had sent, "I need you to be completely honest with me. How are your finances?" Honoria took a breath. "I don't have any. Everything is in Sylvester's name. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. He always said it was easier that way, for taxes." Catherine's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened slightly. "How long were you married?" 40 years. We married in May 1984. "Children?" "One daughter, Eleanor. She's 34. "Did you work during the marriage?" "I was a pediatric nurse before we married. I worked for 6 months after the wedding, then Sylvester asked me to quit. He said his career had more potential. We were going to start a family." Honoria paused. "We didn't have Eleanor until 1990. By then, I'd been out of nursing for 5 years. It seemed pointless to go back." Catherine was taking notes. "Mrs. Northbridge, may I call you Honoria?" "Please." "Honoria, you're entitled to half of all marital assets. After 40 years, any court will recognize your contribution to the marriage, even without a paycheck. The house, the retirement accounts, investments, all of it is marital property. Sylvester won't make this easy. He's already trying to make it difficult." Catherine tapped the letter. "This language about abandoning the home is strategic. He's trying to establish a narrative. Has he shown any concerning behavior since you left?" Honoria thought about the phone calls, the emails, the visits to Eleanor's house, the threats. "He's been persistent. Has he threatened you?" "Not directly, not physically. But he said things, that I'll get nothing, that he'll prove I'm mentally unstable." She stopped. "Wait. He said he has a doctor who will testify that I have dementia or something." Catherine's pen stopped. "He said this to you?" "To Eleanor. In front of their house on December 3rd. Did you hear this conversation?" "No. Eleanor told me about it." "Hearsay, then. Not admissible in court." Catherine made a note. "But worth knowing. Honoria, I need you to document everything from now on. Every phone call, every email, every interaction. Dates, times, what was said. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. Now, let's talk about assets. You said everything is in Sylvester's name. Do you know what everything amounts to?" Honoria hesitated. "The house is worth about $800,000, maybe more now. We bought it in 1995 for $350,000. It's at 847 Laurel Heights Drive." Catherine wrote this down. "Mortgage?" "Paid off. Sylvester paid it off in 2018 when he got his retention bonus." "Do you know how much that bonus was?" $500,000. "Good. What else?" "His retirement account from Northbridge Manufacturing. I don't know exact amounts, but he worked there for 38 years. He was CFO when he retired in 2022. We'll get those records in discovery. Investment accounts?" "He has accounts with Fidelity and Vanguard. I've seen statements over the years." Honoria closed her eyes, trying to remember. "The last one I saw was maybe 2 years ago. The Fidelity account had about $4 million. The Vanguard had more." Catherine looked up. "How much more?" "The statement said $8,200,000, but that was in 2022. So we're potentially looking at $12 million in investments alone, plus the house, plus retirement accounts." Catherine leaned back. "Honoria, you're not poor. You've just been prevented from accessing what's legally yours." The words hit Honoria like a physical blow. I never thought about it that way." "That's financial abuse. It's a form of domestic abuse, and it's more common than you think." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "We're going to get you what you're owed. But Honoria, I need you to be prepared. Your husband is going to fight. He's already threatening to claim mental incompetence. That's a serious strategy." "I'm not incompetent." "I know, but we need to prove it definitively. I want you to get a full cognitive evaluation. Today, if possible." We'll establish baseline medical evidence that you're completely lucid and capable. All right. And Honoria, one more thing. Has your husband ever mentioned offshore accounts, properties in other names? Anything that might suggest hidden assets? No, nothing like that. Why? Because men like your husband, men who are this controlling about money, often have backup plans. Hidden assets they can claim don't exist. I'm going to request full financial discovery, but it would help if you could look for any records in the house. I don't have access to the house anymore. Do you have a key? Yes, but Sylvester doesn't know you've left permanently. As far as the law is concerned, it's still your marital home. You have every legal right to enter it. Catherine leaned forward. I'm not suggesting you sneak in. I'm suggesting you exercise your legal right to retrieve personal belongings. And if while retrieving those belongings you happen to notice financial documents, Honoria understood. When should I go? Tomorrow, Tuesday, December 10th. Sylvester has golf every Tuesday at 1 p.m., doesn't he? It was in the biographical information you gave me. Every Tuesday at Oakmont Country Club. He tees off at 1:30. He's usually gone until 5. Then tomorrow at 2 p.m. you go home. Take Eleanor with you as a witness. Gather your personal items. And if you see any financial documents, bank statements, property deeds, account information, photograph them. Don't take originals. We don't want to give him any ammunition. The next day, December 10th, Honoria stood outside 847 Laurel Heights Drive with Eleanor beside her and Sophie in the car. Are you sure about this, Mom? No, Honoria admitted. But Catherine said it's legal. She put her key in the lock. The door opened. The house smelled the same, lemon polish and expensive coffee. For a moment, Honoria couldn't breathe. 40 years. 40 years of her life had happened in this house. Mom, Eleanor touched her arm. You okay? Yes. Let's make this quick. They went to the master bedroom first. Honoria gathered her clothes, her jewelry, her personal items. Things she'd left behind in her rush on Thanksgiving. Then she went to Sylvester's study. The door was locked, but she had a key, one he didn't know she'd made years ago, after too many times being told she couldn't enter his space. Inside, everything was exactly as Sylvester preferred it. Mahogany desk, leather chair, filing cabinets labeled by year. Honoria pulled open the drawer marked 2024 Financial. Inside were folders, bank statements, investment reports, property documents. Her hand shook as she pulled out the first file. Oh my God, she whispered. Eleanor came to her side. What is it? Look at this. Honoria held up a bank statement. This is an account I've never seen before. At First National Bank, account number ending in 7743. The balance is, she squinted at the number. $2,347,000. What? Honoria pulled out another file. Property deed. For 1547 Riverside Court, Unit 12B, a condo. Purchased in 2019 for $675,000. I didn't know we owned a condo. We don't, Eleanor said slowly. That's a building downtown. Those units rent for $3,000 a month. They looked at each other. Honoria started photographing everything with her phone, every page, every statement, every document. The Fidelity account, $4,847,193. The Vanguard account, $8,981,145. The secret First National account, $2,247,881. The condo on Riverside. A second property, a rental house at 89 Oak Street, purchased 2020. A third property, commercial building, 450 Industrial Way, purchased 2021. Honoria's phone was filling with photographs. Her hands shook so badly Eleanor had to take over. And then Eleanor found the folder labeled Confidential. Inside was a deed to a vacation home in Cape Cod. 217 Beachfront Road, Chatham, Massachusetts. Purchased in 2017 for $1.2 million. Under that, credit card statements for cards Honoria had never seen. Capital One card ending in 4891. $47,000 balance. Chase card ending in 2234. $38,500 balance. The name on the accounts. Honoria R. Northbridge. Mom, Eleanor's voice was shaking. Did you open these credit cards? No, I've never seen these before. The debt is in your name. $47,000 plus $38,000. That's $85,000 of debt. In your name. They photographed everything. At 4:30 p.m., they left. Sophie was still in the car reading a book, earbuds in. Did you get what you needed? She asked innocently. More than we needed, Eleanor said grimly. That night, Honoria sent all 247 photographs to Catherine Reynolds. Catherine called her at 9:17 p.m. Honoria, we need to meet tomorrow morning, first thing. This is bigger than divorce. This is fraud, identity theft, financial abuse on a scale I haven't seen in years. What do I do? Tomorrow we go on offense. And Honoria? Your husband is about to discover he's been underestimating you for 40 years. January 15th, 2025. The courtroom at 500 State Street smelled of old wood and furniture polish. Honoria sat beside Catherine Reynolds, her hands trembling slightly in her lap despite her best efforts to appear calm. Across the aisle, Sylvester sat with Theodore Blackwood, looking confident. Too confident. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His navy suit, Tom Ford, $3,400, she'd seen the receipt, was immaculate. He looked like what he'd always been, a successful executive, a pillar of the community, a man who commanded respect. He looked nothing like a man who had committed fraud, identity theft, and systematic financial abuse for years. Behind Honoria, in the gallery, sat Eleanor and Sophie. Beatrice was there too, along with two of Honoria's old nursing colleagues who had driven 3 hours to support her. The gallery was surprisingly full. Word had spread about the case. A 62-year-old woman divorcing her wealthy husband after 40 years. Accusations of financial abuse and mental incompetence flying in both directions. This wasn't the main divorce hearing. That was scheduled for February 12th. This was the preliminary hearing about Sylvester's petition for grandparent visitation rights, his legal attempt to maintain contact with Sophie. But both Catherine and Honoria knew what it really was, a test run. Sylvester's strategy to establish that Honoria was mentally incompetent before the divorce proceedings even began. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and sharp brown eyes. All rise. Everyone stood. Please be seated. We're here for the matter of Northbridge vs. Northbridge, case number 2025 CV 00847, regarding grandparent visitation rights. Mr. Blackwood, you may proceed. Theodore Blackwood stood. He was in his 60s, expensive suit, perfectly modulated voice. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Sylvester Northbridge, is a devoted grandfather who has been unjustly cut off from his granddaughter, Sophie Hayes, age 12. This separation has occurred due to Mrs. Honoria Northbridge's recent erratic behavior and concerning mental state. Catherine was already on her feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Northbridge's mental state is not the issue here, and Mr. Blackwood knows it. Sustained. Mr. Blackwood, stick to the facts of your petition. Of course, Your Honor. Blackwood didn't miss a beat. Mr. Northbridge has been a constant presence in Sophie's life since her birth. He has attended birthday parties, school plays, holiday gatherings. He has provided financial support, contributing $85,000 for his daughter Eleanor's down payment on her current home in 2019, and monthly support payments of $1,500 since her divorce in 2020, totaling $90,000 over 5 years. He gestured to a presentation board covered with photographs. Sylvester with baby Sophie. Sylvester at Sophie's kindergarten graduation, Christmas mornings, birthday cakes. My client fears that Mrs. Northbridge's recent behavior, leaving the marital home without warning on Thanksgiving, making irrational accusations, refusing communication, will result in parental alienation. He simply requests reasonable visitation to maintain his relationship with his granddaughter. Mrs. Reynolds? Judge Morrison looked at Catherine. Your Honor, Mr. Northbridge's concern for his granddaughter is touching but disingenuous. The real issue is control. Mr. Northbridge is attempting to use Sophie as leverage in ongoing divorce proceedings. As for Mrs. Northbridge's mental state— Your Honor, Blackwood interrupted, if I may present evidence regarding Mrs. Northbridge's concerning behavior. Judge Morrison nodded. Proceed. Blackwood produced a stack of documents. Statements from neighbors regarding Mrs. Northbridge's recent forgetfulness and confusion. From Mrs. Patricia Whitmore of 8 and 31 Laurel Heights Drive. I encountered Honoria at Riverside Market on December 8th. She seemed disoriented and couldn't remember what she'd come to buy. From Mr. Robert Henderson of 901 Laurel Heights Drive. At our Christmas gathering on December 20th, Honoria forgot my wife's name despite knowing her for 15 years. He continued. Additionally, we have a preliminary evaluation from Dr. James Patterson, a neurologist at Riverside Medical Center. Based on the reported symptoms, memory lapses, sudden personality changes, irrational decision-making, Dr. Patterson believes Mrs. Northbridge may be experiencing early-stage cognitive decline. Catherine's jaw tightened. Your Honor, Mrs. Northbridge underwent a complete neurological evaluation on December 9th, 2024, with Dr. Sarah Chen at Memorial Hospital. She scored perfectly on all cognitive tests. I have those results here. I'd like to see both evaluations, Judge Morrison said. As the attorneys approached the bench, Honoria's hands gripped the armrests. This was the strategy Catherine had warned her about. Sylvester was trying to paint her as incompetent, unstable, incapable of making her own decisions. If it worked, he could claim she wasn't mentally fit to consent to divorce proceedings. He could petition for conservatorship. He could control everything, just like he'd threatened. Judge Morrison was reading Dr. Chen's evaluation, her expression growing stern. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Patterson's evaluation is based entirely on third-party reports. Dr. Chen's evaluation is based on actual examination. There's a significant difference. Your Honor, Dr. Patterson has known the family for years. Has he examined Mrs. Northbridge? Not formally, but then his opinion is speculation. Judge Morrison set down the papers. Mrs. Reynolds, does Mrs. Northbridge have anything to say regarding these allegations? Catherine turned to Honoria. This was the moment they'd prepared for. Honoria stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Your Honor, I'm 62 years old, not 92. I don't have memory problems. Mrs. Whitmore's statement is false. I wasn't disoriented at the market. I was on the phone with my attorney and stepped out without my shopping list. Mr. Henderson's claim is also false. I didn't forget his wife's name. I called her Patricia, but he misheard me say Patience while talking to someone else. Both those witnesses, Catherine added, are close friends of Mr. Northbridge. Their statements are not objective. Judge Morrison looked at the gallery. Is Sophie Hayes present? Eleanor stood. Yes, Your Honor, I'm her mother, Eleanor Northbridge Hayes. Sophie is here with me. Young lady, would you approach the bench? Sophie stood slowly. Honoria turned to look at her granddaughter, small for 12, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a navy dress Eleanor had bought specifically for court. Sophie walked forward, and Honoria saw something in her hands. Her tablet, the old one Honoria had given her. What's your name? Judge Morrison asked gently. Sophie Marie Hayes, ma'am. How old are you? 12. I'll be 13 on March 15th. Do you understand why we're here today? Yes, ma'am. My grandfather wants to visit me, but my mom and grandma don't think it's safe. Sylvester stirred in his seat. Blackwood put a hand on his arm. Why don't they think it's safe? Judge Morrison asked. Sophie's hands tightened on the tablet. Because he's mean to my grandma, and he lies. Sophie? Blackwood started to stand. Mr. Blackwood, sit down, Judge Morrison said sharply. She turned back to Sophie. Those are serious allegations, Sophie. Can you explain? Your Honor, Sophie said, and her voice was surprisingly steady. May I show you something my grandmother doesn't know about? The courtroom went completely silent. Honoria felt her heart stop. She looked at Catherine, who looked just as confused. What would you like to show me? Judge Morrison asked. Sophie held up the tablet. About 3 months ago, I got worried about Grandma. I heard my grandfather talking and it sounded mean. So I started recording things, just in case. Recording what things? Him, when he came to our house, when he talked to my mom, when he... Sophie's voice wavered slightly. When he threatened Grandma. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, Blackwood protested, now fully standing. A child recording conversations without consent, in her own home, Catherine cut in, standing as well. Which is completely legal. Your Honor, I knew nothing about these recordings, but I'd very much like to hear them. Judge Morrison studied Sophie for a long moment. Young lady, did anyone tell you to make these recordings? No, ma'am. I did it myself. I was scared for my grandma. Approach the bench with the tablet. Sophie walked forward. Eleanor followed protectively. Honoria sat frozen, her mind racing. Recordings? Sophie had been recording Sylvester? Judge Morrison took the tablet. How many recordings are there? 5, Your Honor, but the first 3 are the important ones. Your Honor? Blackwood tried again. Even if these recordings are technically legal, a 12-year-old's interpretation, I'll decide what's admissible, Mr. Blackwood. Judge Morrison looked at Sophie. Which recording should I listen to first? Recording number 2, Sophie said immediately, from December 3rd. That's when he talks about Dr. Patterson. Judge Morrison tapped the screen. Put in earbuds. The courtroom waited in absolute silence. Honoria watched the judge's face, saw her eyebrows rise, saw her expression shift from curiosity to shock to fury. After 4 minutes, Judge Morrison removed the earbuds. Her face was pale. Mr. Northbridge, she said, and her voice could have cut glass. Would you like to stand? Sylvester stood slowly. For the first time, Honoria saw uncertainty in his face. Did you have a conversation with your daughter Eleanor on the evening of December 3rd, 2024, at approximately 7:47 p.m. at 342 Elmwood Terrace? I may have spoken with my daughter, yes. Did you in that conversation state that you had arranged for Dr. James Patterson to provide false testimony about your wife's mental state? The courtroom erupted. Blackwood was on his feet. Your Honor, I object strenuously. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. I asked Mr. Northbridge a question. Sylvester's face had gone from pale to red. That recording was taken out of context. Out of context. Judge Morrison's voice rose. Would you like me to play it for the courtroom? Because I will. Your Honor, Blackwood tried. In fact, I think I will. Judge Morrison stood, connected the tablet to the courtroom's audio system. Sylvester's voice filled the room, crystal clear. I don't care what the lawyer says, Eleanor. Your mother is not getting a dime. I've worked too hard to let her walk away with half of everything. Eleanor's voice, tired. Dad, after 40 years, she deserves what I say she deserves. I've already talked to Dr. Patterson. He's willing to testify that she's experiencing cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever we need. He owes me from that hospital board vote in 2019. With that on record, I can argue she's not competent to make decisions about the divorce. I'll get conservatorship, control everything, and she'll end up right back where she belongs. Eleanor, Dad, that's fraud. You can't. I can, and I will. Your mother has embarrassed me enough. Walking out after 40 years, making me look like the bad guy to all our friends. She's going to learn what happens when you cross Sylvester Northbridge. The recording clicked off. The silence was deafening. Judge Morrison turned to Sylvester. Her face was rigid with anger. Mr. Northbridge, did you just hear yourself admit to planning to commit fraud upon this court? That was a private conversation, in which you admitted to conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted exploitation of the legal system. She turned to Blackwood. Counselor, I strongly suggest you have a conversation with your client about the penalties for perjury and attempted fraud. Blackwood had gone pale. He was frantically whispering to Sylvester, who kept shaking his head. Your Honor, Sophie's small voice cut through the chaos. There's more. Judge Morrison looked at her. More? Yes, ma'am? Recording 3, from December 10th, when he came to our house and threatened Grandma. Play it. This recording was worse. Sylvester's voice, cold and threatening. His words about putting Honoria in a facility, controlling her care, destroying her reputation. And then, at the end, Sophie's young voice, shaking. Grandma, are you okay? And Honoria's voice breaking. I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm fine. When it ended, Judge Morrison removed her glasses, wiped them, put them back on. Mr. Northbridge, I am denying your petition for visitation entirely. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. You are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Mrs. Honoria Northbridge, Mrs. Eleanor Northbridge Hayes, or Sophie Hayes, pending the outcome of your divorce proceedings. Your Honor, please, Sylvester started. I'm not finished. I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges related to your admitted conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. This court takes these matters extremely seriously. She turned to Dr. Patterson, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. Dr. Patterson, I assume you're present as a potential witness. Dr. Patterson stood slowly. He was in his late 50s, graying hair, expensive suit. Yes, Your Honor. You're dismissed. I'll be forwarding this recording to the State Medical Board. They'll want to discuss your professional ethics. Dr. Patterson's face went white. He looked at Sylvester, then at the judge, then quickly left the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked at Sophie. Young lady, you may have just saved your grandmother from a terrible injustice. This court thanks you. Sophie looked at Honoria, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Grandma. I didn't want to scare you. But I heard him and I knew he was being mean, and I just wanted to help. Honoria stood and went to her, pulling Sophie into her arms. You did help, sweetheart. You helped more than you know. 3 days later, January 18th, 2025, Catherine Reynolds called an emergency meeting at her office. When Honoria arrived at 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, Catherine wasn't alone. There was a man in his 40s with her, balding, glasses, carrying a briefcase that looked heavy. Honoria, this is David Wu. He's a forensic accountant. I brought him in to analyze the financial documents you photographed from Sylvester's study. David Wu shook Honoria's hand. His grip was firm. Mrs. Northbridge, please sit down. What I'm about to tell you is significant. Honoria sat. Eleanor was there too, having taken the morning off work. We've been going through your husband's financial records for the past 72 hours, David began. The accounts you found, the secret bank account, the properties, the credit cards in your name, those were just the surface. What do you mean? Honoria asked. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. Your husband has been systematically hiding assets for the past 7 years, since 2018. Let me walk you through what we've found. He laid out documents on Catherine's conference table. First, the properties. You found 3, the condo on Riverside Court, the rental house on Oak Street, and the commercial building on Industrial Way, but there are more. He pulled out property deeds. 4 more rental properties in different LLCs. 2847 Carson Street, purchased 2018 for $340,000. 156 Wilmington Avenue, purchased 2019 for $425,000. 89 to 91 Highland Road, a duplex, purchased 2020 for $580,000. And 1120 Sikendell Street, purchased 2321 for $495,000. Honoria stared at the deeds. That's 7 properties total? 7 investment properties, plus your marital home at 847 Laurel Heights Drive, plus the vacation home in Cape Cod. David pulled out more papers. Total real estate portfolio value, approximately $6.8 million. Current market value, not purchase price. Eleanor was taking notes furiously. How did he hide this? LLCs, limited liability companies. Each property is owned by a different LLC, and your husband is listed as the registered agent, but the ownership is obscured through holding companies. David showed them the corporate paperwork. Northbridge Holdings LLC owns the Riverside condo. Summit Properties LLC owns the Oak Street house. The commercial building is owned by Cascade Investments, LLC. The pattern continues. Is that illegal? Honoria asked. No. Using LLCs for property investment is common and legal, but failing to disclose them in divorce proceedings is fraud. Catherine's voice was hard. And it gets worse. David pulled out bank statements. The secret account at First National Bank with $2.3 million. That was funded by systematic transfers from the marital investment accounts. Starting in January 2018, your husband transferred $15,000 per month, $180,000 per year, from the Fidelity and Vanguard accounts into this hidden account. Over 7 years, that's $1.26 million transferred, plus investment gains, bringing it to $2.347 million as of December 2024. Honoria felt dizzy. He's been planning this for 7 years? It gets worse, David repeated. He pulled out more statements. The credit cards in your name with $85,000 in debt? Those were opened in 2020, and the charges are all for a property at 1547 Riverside Court, Unit 12B, the downtown condo. Why would he put debt in my name for his property? Because, Catherine said grimly, in a divorce, debt is also divided. He was creating debt in your name so you'd be liable for half of it, while he kept the asset that generated the debt. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. That's insane. How is that legal? It's not. It's identity theft and fraud. Catherine looked at Honoria. Did you ever sign applications for those credit cards? No. I've never seen them before December 10th. Then the signatures are forged. That's a felony. David wasn't done. There's more. Your husband has been receiving rental income from these properties, approximately $14,500 per month total, or $174,000 per year. Over the past 7 years, that's $1.218 million in rental income that was never reported on your joint tax returns. Tax fraud, Catherine said. Add that to the list. But here's the biggest finding. David pulled out a thick stack of papers. In March 2020, your husband took out a home equity line of credit on your marital home, $500,000. You would have had to sign that paperwork. Honoria shook her head. I never signed anything like that. David showed her the signature page. There was her name, Honoria R. Northbridge, in handwriting that looked like hers but wasn't quite right. That's not my signature, she whispered. No, it's a very good forgery, but if you look closely, David pointed to specific letters. The capital H is wrong. Your H has a distinctive loop. This one doesn't. And the R in your middle initial slants differently. He forged my signature to borrow $500,000 against our house? Yes. And here's what he did with that money. David pulled out wire transfer records. $500,000 wired on March 15, 2020 to Northbridge Ventures, LLC, which then used that money to purchase 2 of the rental properties, Highland Road and Sycandil Street, in April and May of 2020. Eleanor was pale. So he stole money using Mom's forged signature, hid it in an LLC, bought properties with it, and collected rental income that he never reported. Exactly. Honoria couldn't breathe. 7 years. For 7 years, Sylvester had been building a secret empire, using her name, forging her signature, preparing for... what? Divorce? Or something worse? Why? She finally asked. Why would he do this? Catherine and David exchanged a look. Mrs. Northbridge, David said carefully, in my experience, this level of financial planning suggests your husband was either preparing for divorce or what? Or preparing for your death. The room went silent. The life insurance policy, Catherine said quietly. You mentioned he changed the beneficiary? Honoria nodded. I found the policy in his study. It was for $2 million. I'd always been the beneficiary, but in 2019 he changed it to someone named Victoria Lang. Who is Victoria Lang? David asked. I don't know. I've never heard that name. Catherine picked up her phone, made a call. Rachel, I need you to run a name for me. Victoria Lang. Cross-reference with Sylvester Northbridge. Yes, I'll wait. They sat in silence for 3 minutes. Catherine's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went hard. Victoria Lang, age 45. She lives at 1547 Riverside Court, Unit 12B. The condo, the one with $85,000 in credit card debt in Honoria's name. Your husband's mistress has been living in a condo he bought with debt attached to your name, and she's the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, Catherine said. Honoria, your husband wasn't just preparing for divorce. He was preparing to erase you. The phone call came on January 22nd, 4 days after the financial revelations. Catherine called Honoria at 2:47 p.m. We need to meet, now. Something's happened. An hour later, Honoria was back in Catherine's office. But this time, there was someone unexpected waiting. Dr. James Patterson. Mrs. Northbridge, Catherine said carefully, Dr. Patterson has requested to speak with you. I've advised against it, but he insists he has information you need to hear. I'll be present for the entire conversation. Dr. Patterson looked terrible. His face was drawn, with dark circles under his eyes. His hands shook slightly as he stood to greet her. Mrs. Northbridge, I owe you an apology. And an explanation. Honoria said nothing. This was the man who'd been willing to lie about her mental state to help Sylvester destroy her. Please sit, he said. What I have to tell you, it's important. They sat. Catherine positioned herself between them, protective. After the hearing on January 15th, Dr. Patterson began, after Judge Morrison said she was referring me to the medical board, I realized I couldn't continue with this. I've been having doubts for weeks, but that moment, hearing that recording, seeing what Sylvester was willing to do, I knew I had to come forward. Come forward about what? Catherine asked. Everything. Sylvester Northbridge has been using me for years. The hospital board vote in 2019 wasn't a favor. It was leverage. I had made a mistake. A medical error that resulted in a patient complaint. It wasn't serious, but it could have damaged my reputation. Sylvester was on the board. He made it disappear. And ever since, he's been calling in that debt. What do you mean, calling it in? Honoria asked. Medical reports, favorable evaluations for his business associates, disability certifications for insurance fraud, and yes, the plan to testify about your cognitive decline. Dr. Patterson looked directly at her. Mrs. Northbridge, I have never examined you. I have no medical basis for any opinion about your mental state. Everything I was going to say in court was scripted by Sylvester. You were going to commit perjury, Catherine said flatly. Yes, and I can't live with that anymore. He pulled out a folder. This is a complete statement of everything Sylvester has asked me to do over the past 6 years. Dates, names, cases, including 3 other divorce cases where I provided false medical testimony to help his friends obtain favorable settlements. Catherine took the folder, started reading. Her eyebrows rose with each page. Dr. Patterson, Honoria said slowly, why are you telling me this? Because I have daughters. I watched that little girl, Sophie, stand up in court to protect you, and I realized I've been enabling an abuser. I've been helping men like Sylvester destroy women like you, and I can't do it anymore. You could lose your medical license, Catherine pointed out. I know. I've already contacted the medical board myself. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come. He looked at Honoria. But there's something else you need to know. Something I overheard. What? In December, Sylvester called me. He was furious about your divorce filing, and he said something. Dr. Patterson paused. He said, if that doesn't work, we'll go to Plan B. Victoria is ready. Victoria Lang? Honoria felt ice in her veins. I don't know who Victoria is, but when I asked him what Plan B meant, he laughed and said, grief is easier to prove than incompetence, and much more sympathetic, especially when a man loses his wife tragically. The room went completely silent. He was talking about killing you, Eleanor whispered. She'd been so quiet, Honoria had almost forgotten she was there. I don't know, Dr. Patterson said quickly. I don't know if he meant it literally or if he was just venting. But given everything else, the life insurance beneficiary change, the hidden assets, the preparation, I thought you should know. Catherine was already on her phone. I'm calling Detective Morrison at the police department. This is a credible threat. Wait, Dr. Patterson said. There's more. I have recordings too. He pulled out his phone. After that conversation, I started recording my calls with Sylvester, just in case. I have 6 calls over the past month, including one from January 19th, after the preliminary hearing. He played the recording. Sylvester's voice, tight with rage. You idiot, Patterson. You were supposed to be bulletproof. Now everything's falling apart because a 12-year-old had a tape recorder. Dr. Patterson's voice. Sylvester, I told you this was a bad idea. Shut up. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to recant. Say you were coerced. Say Catherine Reynolds threatened you. Say anything that takes heat off me. I can't do that. They'll verify. Then we accelerate Plan B. Victoria's ready. The house at Cape Cod is remote. Tragic accident during reconciliation attempt. She comes back devastated, inherits everything, and we're done with this problem. You can't be serious. Watch me. I've built too much to let it go now. 40 years of dealing with that woman's weakness, her incompetence. She thinks she can just leave? She thinks she deserves my money? She gets nothing, even if I have to put her in the ground to make sure of it. The recording ended. Honoria thought she might be sick. Catherine was already talking to the police. Yes. Credible threat. Recordings. Financial motive. Yes, we'll wait for you at my office. Dr. Patterson looked at Honoria with something like desperation. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for my part in this. I should have stopped him years ago. Why didn't you? Honoria asked. Fear. Cowardice. The same reasons anyone lets evil continue. He stood. I'll testify to everything. Whatever you need. I can't undo what I've done, but I can try to make it right. 2 hours later, Detective Sarah Morrison, no relation to Judge Morrison, arrived with 2 officers. They took statements, listened to all of Dr. Patterson's recordings, examined the evidence Catherine and David Wu had compiled. Mrs. Northbridge, Detective Morrison said, We're going to arrest your husband tonight. Multiple charges, fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit murder. With this evidence, the DA will prosecute. Conspiracy? Eleanor asked. He didn't actually do anything yet. He planned it. He recruited an accomplice, this Victoria Lang. He made threats on recorded calls. That's enough for conspiracy charges. And given the financial fraud, we have more than enough to hold him while we investigate further. That night, at 9:47 p.m., Sylvester Northbridge was arrested at 847 Laurel Heights Drive. The charges, 16 felony counts including wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Bond was set at $2 million. Sylvester couldn't make bail. The accounts were frozen pending divorce proceedings. For the first time in 40 years, Honoria Northbridge slept, knowing she was safe. The main divorce hearing was scheduled for February 12, 2025. But given Sylvester's arrest, the proceedings took on a different character. Theodore Blackwood had withdrawn from the case immediately after the criminal charges were filed. Sylvester's new attorney, Robert Mills, was a public defender who looked overwhelmed from the moment he entered the courtroom. Judge Morrison, the same judge from the preliminary hearing, presided. She looked at Sylvester with barely concealed disgust. He sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. No Tom Ford suit today. His silver hair was uncombed. He'd aged 10 years and 4 weeks. Mr. Mills, I understand your client wishes to proceed with this hearing despite the pending criminal charges. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Northbridge maintains his innocence on all criminal charges and wishes to resolve the divorce proceedings. Very well. Mrs. Reynolds, you may present your case. Catherine stood. She had a thick binder of evidence. Your Honor, this is one of the most egregious cases of financial abuse I've encountered in 20 years of practice. Mr. Sylvester Northbridge systematically hid assets, forged his wife's signature, created fraudulent debt in her name, and planned her murder to prevent her from accessing marital property. The evidence is overwhelming. For the next 2 hours, Catherine presented everything. The hidden properties, 7 investment properties worth $6.8 million, the secret bank account, $2,981. The rental income, $1,218 million over 7 years, unreported. The forged signatures, 3 credit cards, 1 home equity line of credit. The tax fraud, $174,000 per year in unreported rental income. The life insurance beneficiary change, $2 million policy to Victoria Lang. The mistress, living in a condo with debt fraudulently attached to Honoria's name. The recordings, Dr. Patterson's phone calls, Sophie's evidence of threats and conspiracy. David Wu testified. Dr. Patterson testified. Sophie's recordings were played for the court. Sylvester sat silent through all of it. His attorney occasionally objected, but weakly. There was no defense. The evidence was documentary, recorded, irrefutable. Finally, Judge Morrison asked, "Mr. Northbridge, do you wish to testify?" Sylvester stood, and for the first time, Honoria saw him truly broken. "Your Honor, He stopped, started again. "I built everything. For 40 years I worked. I provided. I gave her a good life." "You gave her nothing," Judge Morrison interrupted. "You controlled her. You isolated her. You stole from her. You planned to kill her." I wouldn't have actually," he couldn't finish. "Sit down, Mr. Northbridge." He sat. Judge Morrison looked at her notes for a long moment. Then she looked at Honoria. "Mrs. Northbridge, would you like to speak?" Honoria stood. She'd prepared a statement, but looking at Sylvester now, this shell of the man who'd controlled her for 40 years, she realized she didn't need it. "Your Honor, for 40 years I believed my husband when he said I'd contributed nothing. I believed him when he said everything belonged to him. I believed him when he said I was lucky to have what I had." Her voice was steady, strong. "I gave him my youth, my career, my identity. I raised our daughter. I managed our home. I supported his career. And I did it all for free because I thought that's what love was." She looked directly at Sylvester. "But love isn't control. It isn't theft. It isn't threats and lies and systematic abuse. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for what's mine, what I earned over 40 years of partnership, even if my partner never saw me as an equal." She sat down. Judge Morrison nodded. "Mrs. Northbridge, the court recognizes your contribution to this marriage. Mr. Northbridge, the court finds that you have committed massive fraud, theft, and abuse. Here is my ruling." She read from her prepared judgment. 1. The marital assets will be divided 65 to 35 in favor of Mrs. Northbridge, given the egregious financial abuse. Mrs. Northbridge will receive 65% of all property, accounts, and investments. Sylvester's head dropped. 2. All hidden assets, the properties, the secret accounts, the rental income, are classified as marital property subject to division. 3. The debt fraudulently created in Mrs. Northbridge's name is assigned entirely to Mr. Northbridge. Mrs. Northbridge has no liability. 4. The $500,000 home equity line of credit, obtained through forgery, is Mr. Northbridge's sole responsibility. 5. The marital home at 847 Laurel Heights Drive will be sold. Proceeds split according to the 65 to 35 division. 6. Mr. Northbridge will pay Mrs. Northbridge's legal fees in full, $47,500 as of today's date. 7. A permanent restraining order is issued. Mr. Northbridge is prohibited from any contact with Mrs. Northbridge, Eleanor Northbridge Hayes, or Sophie Hayes for life. Judge Morrison set down her papers. "Mr. Northbridge, you are one of the most reprehensible individuals I've encountered on this bench. You spent years preparing to steal from and potentially murder the woman who devoted her life to you. The criminal proceedings will determine your fate regarding jail time. But in this court I want you to know, you lost. You lost everything, and you deserve it." She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned." Honoria sat still as the courtroom erupted around her. Eleanor was crying. Sophie was hugging her. Catherine was shaking her hand. But Honoria just sat, feeling light, free. After 40 years of weight she hadn't realized she was carrying, she was finally free. Sylvester was led away in handcuffs. He tried to turn, to look at her one last time. Honoria didn't look back. August 15th, 2025. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Honoria's condo at 892 Riverside Walk, Unit 8C. It was small, only 900 square feet, but it was hers. She'd bought it with the first payment from the divorce settlement, $1.2 million up front, with more to come as properties were sold. She stood at her easel in the spare bedroom she'd converted to an art studio. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Her watercolor, a landscape of the park near her building, was nearly complete. Deep greens and blues, with touches of gold where the light hit the water. Last month, she'd sold her first painting at the Riverside Gallery. Just a small piece, 8 by 10 inches, for $250. But someone had thought her work was worth buying. Someone she didn't know, who had no obligation to her, had looked at what she'd created and said, "Yes, I want this." It was the best $250 she'd ever earned. Her phone buzzed. A text from Beatrice. "Coffee tomorrow? 10 a.m. at the Grind?" Honoria smiled and texted back. "Perfect. See you then. No permission needed. No checking schedules. No asking if it was allowed." The doorbell rang. Sunday dinner. Eleanor and Sophie were here. "Grandma." Sophie burst through the door, carrying a covered dish. "Mom made her lasagna, the good one with 4 cheeses. Smells amazing." Honoria kissed her granddaughter's head. "How's the summer reading?" "Done. I read 6 books. And guess what? I'm thinking about joining the debate team in the fall." "That's wonderful." Eleanor came in behind Sophie, carrying wine and garlic bread. "Mom, your place looks great. Did you finish the painting?" "Almost. Come see." They gathered in the studio, looking at the watercolor. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said softly. "You've gotten so good at this." "I've had time to practice." Honoria smiled. "How was your week?" "Busy. I got a new client, tech startup. They want a full rebrand. And Sophie's been helping me with social media content. She's got an eye for it." They moved to the small kitchen. Honoria had set the table. Simple plates from Target. Nothing fancy. They didn't match. She loved that they didn't match. Over dinner, Sophie talked about her plans for 8th grade. Eleanor discussed her business. Honoria shared that she'd been accepted into an advanced watercolor workshop in Maine. A week-long intensive in September. "You should go," Eleanor said immediately. "When's the last time you traveled alone?" "Never," Honoria realized. "I've never traveled alone. Sylvester always." She trailed off. They didn't talk about Sylvester much. He was serving 5 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. The conspiracy to commit murder charge had been dropped. Victoria Lang had testified that Sylvester talked about it but never gave her specific instructions. She'd received immunity in exchange for her testimony. Sylvester would be 68 when he was released. Honoria would be 65. She'd be retired from whatever second career she chose. Maybe running her own gallery, maybe teaching art classes, maybe something else entirely. The point was, she'd be living, and he'd be starting over with nothing, just like he'd tried to do to her. "You should definitely go to Maine," Sophie said firmly. "You need to have adventures, Grandma. You're only 63. That's not old." "You're right," Honoria squeezed her hand. "I'll register tomorrow." After dinner, Sophie helped with dishes while Eleanor packed up leftovers. As they were leaving, Sophie hugged Honoria tightly. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she whispered, "for leaving, for fighting back, for being brave." "I'm proud of you," Honoria replied. "You saved my life, you know. Those recordings. I just wanted to help. You did more than help. You gave me permission to save myself." After they left, Honoria stood on her small balcony, watching the sunset over the river. The sky was deep orange and purple, colors she'd try to capture in watercolor tomorrow. She thought about the past 6 months. The divorce settlement that had given her $4.7 million plus proceeds from property sales. The relief of knowing Sylvester was in prison and couldn't hurt her. The therapy sessions that helped her process 40 years of abuse. The slow rebuilding of herself, not who she'd been at 22, but who she was now at 63. She thought about Dr. Patterson, who'd lost his medical license but had testified at Sylvester's criminal trial. He'd written her a letter of apology. She hadn't responded yet. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. That was her choice. She thought about Victoria Lang, who'd been younger than Eleanor when Sylvester seduced her with promises and money. Victoria had thought she was moving into her boyfriend's investment property. She hadn't known about Honoria until the police interview. She'd been a victim too, in her own way. Honoria thought about forgiveness, whether she owed it, whether she wanted it, whether it mattered. She decided it didn't. Some things weren't about forgiveness. They were about justice, boundaries, and moving forward. At 63 years old, Honoria Northbridge was divorced. She was an artist. She was financially independent. She was free. And the best part? She was just getting started. Inside, her phone buzzed one more time. A notification from the gallery. Your piece Morning Light sold today for $400. Would you like to submit more work? Honoria smiled, typed her reply, and went back to her easel. Tomorrow she'd start a new painting. Something bold, something bright, something that was entirely, completely her own.